Last time on the Black Whale of Death, Krollo was looking mighty ready to risk his life so that he could take out Hisoka, and Halkenberg's semi-fake funeral was starting. The troops split up, and there may have been a traitor in the Cha'ar planning their demise. We still have no idea who Beyond wanted to speak to, and it seems like Kurapika didn't start his classes yet either. But this time, we're focused on Morena and her band of merry thieves. So, many people are gathered to mourn for Halkenberg's death, with not the slightest clue of his devious body-swapping plans. It's the 12th day on the ship, and his body is carried up a ridiculously long staircase. It would be a shame if they dropped him like his body rolled down the steps. Just saying, I'm a big fan of coffin flop. Putting that aside, in case you've forgotten, even someone as sadistic as Saride, as his former military pals call him, has people who still care about him, actually. And we finally get to see them after so long, but it's not under good circumstances. When we first met them, they had just learned of Nen and Morena turning on Saride through Borkson, a fellow member of the Kaken army. But apparently the gang haven't heard from her in over 30 minutes, and they agreed to report anything unusual to each other, seeing as they were meant to be looking for the Hyolai members. As part of Saride's guards, they can only assume that Borkson was taken by someone. And not just anyone, seeing as she's a private first class, and there's a crowd of people around that would have noticed. But that just leads them down endless possibilities of how it could be done. Either it was a group who grabbed her, or she was tricked into going to the hospital by someone who recognized and then ambushed there. And with their little knowledge of Nen, they consider that an ability could also have been the cause, forcing her to assassinate Saraidanik in the Hyolai's place. Now the problem is how to deal with her being taken. Should they refuse to negotiate and not try to help her as they had agreed? But before they can decide, a senior guard tells them to split up and do their job properly. So Odasin, Momoli, and the others go off to consider the next step. As expected, a group who could successfully do that and can use Nen is Morena's. Borkson wakes up in front of the lady herself, with two guards behind her. By the way, I can't be the only one who thinks Borkson looks like a squinty-eyed version of Kacho, right? Sometimes Togashi's characters look so much alike, probably because he's created so many for this specific arc. But once Morena makes it clear that she wants Borkson on her side, it's obvious that she's the one they intended to find previously. Remember how they mentioned wanting to get a person with a specific Nen ability? And the more that they knew about their plan, the less likely they were to accept the offer? Yeah, so Borkson is that person. The problem is that she can't figure out how they got her. And she has no weapon to defend herself anymore, so it makes sense that she'd not accept right away. But at the same time, the longer this takes, the more chance there is that they force Borkson to join them. So, to keep things fair for both sides, Morena proposes a game of negotiations with cards. And it seems like the stakes involve Borkson losing all free will beyond the words yes or no, should she quit or lose. From there, we begin a yes and no game of cards, with Morena being the parent who makes the requests of Borkson. By the end of the game, the final card for the child is the response to the request. But seeing as most are yes, with only one no card, it seems it's rigged in Morena's favor. But seeing as there's a return card, there's still a chance Borkson can keep a no at the end by switching out a final yes. And there's a Joker card, which I had previously thought referred to an outside person or even Hisoka himself. It can become either response as needed, but Borkson thinks, as do I, that this game is just a means of making things look fair, when Morena doesn't intend to accept a no. I'd bet she'd keep her there until a yes is given. Oh, and by the way, if you're confused by all of this, that is fine. I don't think Togashi intended everyone to just be on board with this immediately. But anyway, going further, there's another card that appears with just an X on it. This means Borkson can refuse to answer altogether, with Morena promising that she won't force an answer out of her, and will even let her leave without consequences. But do we trust this mafia lady who possibly killed the previous boss? What if she used a game like this to take control of the Hyoli? Either way, that X outcome is assuming Borkson can end the game with that and not one of the yes or no cards. As much as the game seems fair by having only one straightforward yes card, there's so many ways that Morena can manipulate the cards in her favor, just by having the illusion that most of the responses can be turned into no is a trick in itself. If anything, the fact that it seems to be in Borkson's best interest to play means that it's anything but that. But all that doesn't matter though, until she knows the other half of the game, which is what the parent cards can do. But there's one more thing to keep in mind. The parent chooses the child's cards for themselves and sends them to the graveyard. Kind of like in Yu-Gi-Oh! So even if Borkson wants to keep the Joker or the No for the end, it might not make it that far, even with the return card. And there's also the possibility that saying no outright will cause physical torture on her that will force Borkin to say yes in the end. One thing she's also not considering is how many Hail Lee members are surrounding the game itself, which means they can observe the cards from both sides and help Morena choose what would go in her favor. Morena's cards include her purpose, in other words, the goal of having Borkson join them. She's even willing to elaborate on this if needed. The next is Power, a useful card for someone who knows Nen since Morena will explain her ability. But for a beginner like Borkson, I feel like Morena could only share half of her Nen powers and it wouldn't be questioned. Morena does say that she won't be deceitful when it comes to that, but she doesn't say she won't withhold information. On the other hand, since the game will grow in difficulty the longer it takes, she's going to explain quickly to avoid that. The next card is for the questions that Borkson might have, regarding all things except her ability and the purpose. That's because those two cards are solely to answer those specific things. In other words, Borkson would have to be really good at digging through loopholes if she ends up with the Q card, and doesn't know the rest yet. But the mind games don't end there. Morena will answer 3 questions only, and the answers can lead to even more confusion since one of them is both yes and no. On the other hand, question B card can be used to explain further on one of those confusing answers, but it can only be used on the final question that was asked in question A. So that forces Borkson to leave her most important question for the last one, which would also encourage Morena to reply with yes or no, so that the answer is unclear. Every card is a counter to the previous issue, but also brings up even more things to consider and deal with. With that in mind, and more importantly than the rules of the game, Borkson has to know if Morena will be truthful the entire time or not. Due to her training, she thinks that she can read Morena to tell if she will lie or not. Morena brings up an interesting topic of how difficult cultures respond to questions with negatives in them, with one group referring to the question as a subject, while others respond with themselves in mind. It's like the difference between agreeing with the question, so replying yes, or agreeing with the conclusion, so saying no. And it's something Yokotani, a member of the Hail Lee, does due to his background. So they try to make their group seem welcoming and relatable by interjecting, another ploy to get Borkson to trust them easier. But at the same time, Borkson sees this as an interview of sorts. Will she be a good fit for their family or not? At least she gets Morena to answer, but the way she does leaves her with a bad feeling. There's always been something off-putting and deadly about Morena. Borkson spots it as anger strongly coming off Morena, but with no idea where it stems from. We could assume that it might be because of her exclusion from the succession contest, or maybe not being recognized as a legitimate prince when she feels that she should be. As much as this seems like a game where Morena could cheat by using her members, or Nen ability, Borkson can tell by her personality and the family that she won't. Still, no one else is close to her level, and she has absolute authority over everything going on. But there's still one more card. D. No, not that D. It represents a sort of deal between them, where Borkson would agree to a favor in order to return a card from the graveyard. And unlike with other games that the request could be something unreasonable, in this case, Borkson's free to refuse it. So, with everything explained down to the last card, and with more stress about this game than ever, it's time to begin. Borkson agrees to play, so long as she can choose the cards on the child's side, rather than the parent doing so. And Morena says it's fine since she's done it before. Does she mean with other members of the Hail Lee? Or with victims who didn't make it past this game? On the other hand, Morena's side are the ones controlling the shuffling of the cards, which could mean that they set the order that Morena purposely told them to. Having no idea what all their Nen abilities are, I would be extremely worried about having Morena's people being the ones to control the cards. Sure, Borkson is convinced no one will cheat, but what if they don't consider card counting or Nen abilities as a way of cheating? Morena has to reveal all her plans and her Nen, but the rest of them don't. Also, I feel like Morena agreed too quickly to Borkson's request, seeing as it was explained as a part of the game. It feels like she intended for her to ask that, so she wouldn't be able to deny the Hao Li taking care of the cards. Let's just hope that whatever comes next doesn't involve Borkson being tortured for winning the game. I'm sure her military allies wouldn't want that to happen regardless of their plan of action. Do you think we'll be continuing this next chapter, or are we going back to the troops shenanigans? Let me know in the comments, and if you like the video, guys, please give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.